And we're coming to you live for the Built Ford Tough Studio. Boomer Esiason, Greg Giannotti. It's Boomer and Gio on the Fan. Simulcast across the country on CBS Sports Network. And wherever you are in the free Odyssey app, good Thursday morning. This is one of those weeks that I feel like is flying by. We are just cruising right towards the weekend and a feel-good Friday tomorrow. Probably because it's been a different type of week, having dogs in here. And then today we're also doing something different and making history at 7:45 this morning. Long snapping history, the first ever long snapping collegiate commitment ever on national TV and radio, for that matter, will be happening as Bradley Schwartz, Peter Schwartz's son, who will be playing college football, will be making his decision this morning live on the air. Never seen anything like it in the history of long snapping. So very, very excited for that. He's going to be choosing between Western Connecticut, Pace, Wagner, and LIU. So stay tuned for that, about an hour and 45 minutes. And I have to say, Boomer, there is not a team, and I don't think this is like local bias, there is not a team in the NFL that needs the 2024 NFL season to start quicker than the New York Jets. It is negative story after negative story after negative story. Now, Mecole Hardman, he's been in the news now for 2 straight days as he gets accused yesterday of leaking the game plan to the Eagles because he was upset with his role on the team. And then you also had this NFLPA story come out where they polled the players, and Rob Saleh is 24th out of 32 head coaches and how the team likes him. So just more negative stories on top of everything else. Good morning, Boomer. How are you?
Yeah, good morning. And you're right. I don't think that the New York Jets, last year at this time we were talking about Aaron Rodgers coming.
And how great everything was going to be.
Right, and here we are a year later, and still a million questions, and certainly for the Jets themselves, their offensive line and wide receiver positions probably the 2 biggest question marks right now for them going into this offseason, as Joe Douglas kind of touched on all that stuff yesterday. But, I mean, the Mecole Hardman stuff is ridiculous. And, I was happy to see Thomas Morstead, out of all the people out there, actually call him out on it.
Well, also Sauce Gardner, who's been very, very active this offseason and pretends to be the GM, La Sauce, and basically says what guys he wants on the team, which is a little much, but whatever. He did put out there yesterday and delete, so we're not going to talk about the leaked game plan. And then that started this whole thing. And then Zach Rosenblatt, who covers the Jets for The Athletic, he wrote something, and then Connor Hughes of SNY, he said, well, this was a thing. This was, this was an accusation by some that Mecole Hardman had leaked the game plan to the Philadelphia Eagles, who they beat, by the way, the New York Jets. So
maybe he gave them the wrong game plan, or the game plan that he was going by while everybody else was going by a different game plan.
Maybe.
You never know. I mean, but again, I don't know why, these guys go on these podcasts and they just kind of let their guard down and go after people like Mecole Hardman did, and now everybody's going back after him. And if, in fact, he leaked the game plan to somebody on another team that your team was playing.
Because it was bitter?
That's pretty low.
I mean,
that is pretty low.
That's one of the worst things I've probably ever heard as a teammate goes. And I know he was only there for 1 year, but my goodness, he showed up, and on Hard Knocks, he was so happy to be a Jet. He was the one that got the big Jet chain, remember?
Yeah, listen,
that inspired Woody Johnson. He was into it, but then all of a sudden he gets beat out by Xavier Gibson, and the next thing you know, he's like, "Oh, I'm better than this guy. I'm better than that guy. I don't understand why I'm not playing." And he's so bitter that he allegedly is leaking gameplay. I mean, that right there, he called himself a champion, and he knows how to win. My ass. If he's leaking game plans with the Jets, that's as low of a scummy move as you could do to your brothers in that locker room and a guy and a general manager and a head coach that gave you a bunch of money to come over, and then you just weren't good enough.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure why it didn't work for him. I do know that when we were talking about this yesterday, that you have to take into account when he left here, he went back to where he was comfortable and played with the greatest quarterback of his era, and that Patrick Mahomes, and of course, Andy Reid, and it wasn't like he went there and had 70 catches and 700 yards.
It just was on the largest scale of all time. That's why.
Right.
I mean, and that could have been Kadarius Toney if he didn't screw up. Could have been anybody, really.
That's exactly right. And, we had Mecole Hardman on our NFL Today desk right after the game was over. He just scored the game-winning touchdown. Couldn't have been any more pleasant. The joy, the happiness, the euphoria, the whole thing. I would have never thought in my wildest dreams that we would be a month removed from the Super Bowl or, 3 weeks removed from the Super Bowl, and Mecole Hardman would be just trashing the Jets. I mean, Mecole Hardman should be happy that the Jets sent him back to Kansas City.
Yeah.
He should be happy about that. All right, it didn't work with me and the Jets, and I guess what ends up happening is that players feel like, and I know myself because I've been through it, some of this stuff, that you feel like you want people to understand that whatever went wrong where you were at your previous spot, it wasn't your fault. That somehow, some way, you want to blame everybody else for the issues that you had as a player where you were in your previous spot, especially when you get traded in the middle of the season. And I bet you, now that the story comes out that he had leaked the game plan to the Eagles, that expedited that trade.
Oh, without a doubt. And it also made me think about, remember when Aaron Rodgers was talking so much about the leaks in the building? We got to stop that crap, and it's nonsense. And I wasn't even thinking that this was a possibility. I was basically saying, well, your head coach is one of the biggest leaks because he's sitting there talking to Joe Beningo about everything, and Joe Beningo's spewing it out on his weekly spot with Evan and Tiki. But, I mean, this could have been what he was referring to.
One of the things, I'm sure.
But, I mean, this is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I'm sure internally there are things that they know that there's no way that we would know unless something like this with Mecole Hardman went down.
I mean,
the only reason we know about this is because Mecole Hardman has decided to go out there and just, blowtorch the Jets.
Right, and then obviously we just found out about it now, and the Jets were protecting Mecole Hardman all this time. We knew nothing about it, and then the second that he starts killing the Jets, obviously they're going to come back and say something about it as well. But just think about the dysfunction in this organization to the point where the Tim Boyle story, where the Zach Wilson doesn't know if he wants to come back and play because he's afraid of getting hurt and risking his future, comes from Tim Boyle's agent, and then Tim Boyle gets cut immediately. Mecole Hardman's leaking game plans to other teams because he's bitter. He gets traded. I mean, what a mess.
But that listen, you don't expect these things to happen when you sign these guys.
Yeah.
Like when you're signing free agents or you're bringing guys in because, Aaron Rodgers wants these guys in here, the last thing that you're expecting if you're Joe Douglas or Rob Saleh is that to have happened what happened with those two individual players. You don't expect that to happen. It's like so foreign to the way that you would think as a coach and as a general manager. Like you're trying to build a team, you're trying to build a culture, you're trying to do all the right things. And all of a sudden you have these individual players and with their agents, going out there and basically making fools out of themselves and costing the players the jobs for which they were paid handsomely for. I mean, I don't know if I were Joe Douglas and I found out a guy was leaking, or I could confirm that a guy leaked a game plan, 100% he's out. He is out. But I'm not going to make a big deal out of it because, it is an embarrassing story. It's an embarrassing story. Like I brought this guy in as a free agent, gave him more money than Kansas City wanted to.
Yep.
And by the way, he came here. He was the happiest guy on the team.
He was. I mean, in Hard Knocks, he really was the happiest guy on the team. And it is amazing to me that Rob Saleh, too, the other part of this, the negative stories that came out about the Jets yesterday was when they do this NFLPA poll where they're polling all the players that want to participate in this.
And by the way, 1,300 players or 1,350 last year were polled and asked and answered the questions.
Yeah.
This year, over 1,700 responded.
So, and then Rob Saleh ends up on that list as the 24th most favorable head coach. So then I was thinking, okay, I would have thought that he would have been, even though he's been a mess while he's been here, I would have thought he would have been higher. The players would have loved him because he lets the players do whatever the hell they want to do. He doesn't chastise them for any of the social media crap. He's always inspiring them with money and contracts, and he's a player's coach, and he's an attaboy guy. So I'm thinking that even though he didn't have any success, if the players get polled and how do you like your head coach, they're like, hell, he's great. He's just positive, never yells at me, lets me do whatever I want. I mean, it's great. But now you're telling me that they don't even like him that much to put him in the bottom third of the league when it comes to head coaches. What does this guy do well?
You know, the other thing that this all comes on the top of, or along with, I should say, is the Deion Dawkins comments about the Jets.
Right.
The Buffalo
Yes.
Bills. I mean,
This is why I said nobody needs this season to start quicker than the Jets.
Right, exactly. So, you know, and this is all happening around the combine. So the entire league is out in Indianapolis. The media is out there. All these different general managers and head coaches get a chance to talk if they want. And I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, we're being inundated with all this news. Well, you know, the Bears are the most important team right now because they have the number one overall pick, and Ryan Poles, their GM's got to make some decisions here. I think he's already made the decision. The question is when is he going to trade Justin Fields and who is he going to trade him to? But these other teams, and when you think about the way that these coaches were ranked by the players, you know, the other guys that were after Rob Saleh, many of them have been fired.
Yes, Josh McDaniels being the worst, and he was fired midseason.
Arthur Smith.
Yep.
Ron Rivera. All those guys are fired. I don't know if Frank was on that list. I think he was probably on there somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, I feel bad because I thought the Jets went all in last year. They tried to do everything they possibly could. And within 4 plays, the season was over. I mean, even though they beat the Bills that night.
Yeah.
You know, they beat the Bills at the beginning of the season when the Bills were really good. And because if you remember, after that loss, the Bills went on a little bit of a run there, and then they had to go to London.
Yep.
And, you know, I found out about scheduling a little bit in the NFL that most teams can request when their bye is.
Okay.
And if you are a team that is selected to go play internationally, if you want your bye after that international game, that's up to you. You can take it right there if you want it. The league will say, yes, we will work in a bye for you. And Buffalo didn't want their bye.
So it wasn't the league that
wasn't the league that screwed them. It's,
Yeah.
you know, Buffalo decided, hey, look, we're going to do this. There was no experiment or any of that other stuff. I was told that it really did come down to these teams trying to select when they can take their bye. Now, obviously, not everybody can have their bye in week 10. There's got to be different ways you got to move things around. But they will say that if you will have an international game and you want the bye the next week, you know, they'll work that out for you.
Yeah, interesting. And that's what's kind of put them back, set them back during the season. Then they had to fight back and, of course, run into the Kansas City Chiefs and lose again to Patrick Mahomes. But I don't know if there's anything that can happen this offseason for the Jets to have a positive feel about the team going into the year. Is there anything that they could do in the draft or free agency? Like, okay, Devontae Adams isn't coming here. We know that.
They need right now, they need to rebuild their offensive line. Priority number 1.
Well, you know what's going to happen. They're going to sign David Bakhtiari, and he's going to come here and play 4 snaps like Aaron Rodgers did, and he'll be out for the rest of the year.
Oof.
Because he's now available, so you know he's going to be here.
Would be.
You know he's going to be here.
I would be. Well, depending. Listen, if they told me he would take the veteran minimum, I'd bring him in. There's no reason not to. But I'm not paying him, you know, some sort of ungodly sum because his injury history, you know, with the Packers is significant, and you got to be careful about that. I don't look. This is going to be the most important offseason for the New York Jets and the people that are working over there. General Manager Joe Douglas, our buddy, and of course Rob Saleh. Because if they go and have another awful year, then Woody Johnson's going to pull the plug and he's going to go in a different direction. This will be the end of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, no,
anyway.
It would have to be, and then you got to clean up that mess. Because of all the people that Aaron Rodgers brought in, there'll be more this offseason. I mean, I would be absolutely shocked if David Bakhtiari wasn't a New York Jet.
But again, it's all about how much.
Well, it'll be however much he wants because Aaron Rodgers is going to want it.
No, it's not going to be that.
You're going to tell me that they're finally going to stand up to that guy and be like, no, we can't pay him that much?
They can't because of the salary cap and all the
salary cap's going up.
It is going up, but it's not going up to where you can, you know, spend an insane amount on a tackle that basically is towards the end of his career. And
well, it won't be
injured.
An insane amount, but I don't think it'll be somewhere between insane amount and veteran minimum. But they're not going to insult him with an offer
I don't. Maybe you're right. I don't. I just don't. I don't know. I would Aaron want him? I guess he would.
Of course he would.
I don't even know what
friends.
kind of. I don't even know what kind of condition he's in right now. And I don't know what kind of money he would want, and that is a big thing right now.
It is, but when the quarterback runs the organization, and we can go and say, well, how does he not?
If the quarterback be running that organization, had they gone, maybe to the AFC Championship game, and he had an MVP type season, given all that went on here and all the stuff with, the Pat McAfee show and everything else, I would be reticent to think that they are as engaged as they had been last year trying to get him here. Part of trying to get him here was to make sure that he had people around him that he was comfortable with. And that started with Nathaniel Hackett. So they did that. And now it's a different story. Now, everybody's ass is on the line right now. Everybody's job is on the line. You know that.
I know that. And who's the most important person on the team that's going to keep their jobs? Aaron Rodgers. And if he's not happy and he's a problem, then it puts them they painted themselves in a corner with this. They just did.
Well, listen, the injury, nobody expected the injury. Come on, man.
No, I know that, but my point is that if you're telling me that this offseason they're not going to listen to Aaron Rodgers as much as they did last offseason, I'm sorry, I don't believe that.
I think it's a different feel. I think that, maybe they will consult with him. Maybe they will ask him to make some calls to certain players that he would like to play with. Maybe that's what he would do, but even he tried to back away from the thought that he's running the team. Like, he's like, hey, if they need me to, go out there and recruit some players or kind of incentivize some players, come here, I'll do whatever they ask me to do. I'm not telling them what I want to do.
I mean,
that to me, I appreciated that from Aaron, because I think, look, getting injured, there's nothing you can do about it. But I do think that there's a level of disappointment, maybe a little bit of embarrassment, the way the whole thing went down for Aaron. And I think right now it's about, let's keep my head down. Let's work. Let me make sure I can get myself as healthy as I possibly can, and that this Achilles is going to be 100% when I come back for OTAs. And I'm going to try to lead this team maybe a little bit differently than they did last year.
Well, we will see. But I mean, if Randall Cobb came here, and he probably runs about a 7-second 40 at this point. And I don't think anything has changed. And David Bakhtiari could lose a limb in the offseason, and he's going to be the left tackle of the New York Jets. It's going to happen. It just is. He runs the show. And they need him to run the show, because if he doesn't succeed, then all those guys are out of a job. It's over. They have tied the cement brick to their ankle, and they're either going to sink to the bottom, or Aaron Rodgers is going to untie it for them, and they're going to stay afloat. But that's what it is. This offseason is going to be exactly the same as it was last offseason, as Aaron Rodgers is essentially the de facto general manager.
Last thing for me on this one is that I just think that if you're Joe Douglas, it's your job. It's not Aaron Rodgers' job. It's your job. And you're the one that's got to make the decisions. You're the one that's got to put the team together. You're the one that's the boss. And I would suggest to him, as I have done, by the way, to take control and do what you think is in the best interest of the team and how you can get them better. And it's not about pleasing somebody else at this point. This is about you building your team the way you want it. I think their defense is good enough, and they can figure out how to see if they can keep Bryce up. I don't know if they will, but their defense is good enough. They got to figure out their offensive line somehow. That is the priority number one. And then, of course, bringing in a backup quarterback and maybe 2 wide receivers of some significance. Maybe, and I'm talking about a $15 million wide receiver. I don't think they can afford that either.
Yeah, guys like Mike Evans and like LaSauce Gardner wants to have on the team. All right, Boomer and Gio just getting started on this Thursday morning. Jerry Recco will have an update for us just a couple of minutes.